see that we've got some people in and ready to go. We wanted to welcome everybody to today's webinar. I wanted to let you know that we are going to be presenting why we love Business Central Financial Reporting, Part 1. This is the dimensions part. I'm Jane Blacksher, and I work with the BC team. I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Michelle Cerna. Michelle has been in the Business Central consulting realm for over 5 years, and prior to that, she was with the GP team. And she has actually built the Business Central practice for True North and manages a lot of the day-to-day activity for this team, but she's also directly involved with the scoping of solutions and project planning, implementation, and support. So Michelle's kind of the all-around Business Central guru here at True North. I want you to know that there is a question and answer area. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to post those to the Q&A, and Gina Honer and I will actually be watching the Q&A and we'll be answering any questions that we can during the presentation, but also at the end of the presentation, we'll have a specific question and answer period for us to go through any questions that you might have had. So at this point, I'd like to have Michelle just take it away.
Thank you, Jade. That was a very flattering introduction. So like Jade said, we are discussing today dimensions and their importance in Business Central and why we love them so much. We love questions and interaction, so please send those over. We are happy to answer any questions that you have. And Gina will be hopping in here and there too, just to give a little input on GP, so that any GP clients that we have on the phone, we can help you understand how the dimensions are transitioning from GP to Business Central. So to start off, what are dimensions? Dimensions are a tool that's used to help us categorize data. A very simple way to put it is anytime you have something you wish you could report on or you wish you knew about your business, it could probably be a dimension. It enables us to slice and dice data to get an in-depth look at your financials. So your financial statements turn into even more important, more visible with the data that we're trying to capture and present to anyone who needs information about our business. They can be used on entries for your journals, on your documents, on your budgets, and we can use them at the header level of your transactions or the line level. So they can be very, very specific to the different transactions and entries that you're making throughout Business Central. And it can help you make decisions more easily for your business by giving you that specific data and details on your transactional data, even at the financial level. So what are the benefits then? If that's a dimension, what are those benefits? We can clean up your chart of accounts. Your dimensions essentially are replacing your segments in Great Plains. So for every single account that you had a different segment being used, you get to streamline down and have one natural account with several dimensions. You can also retire dimensions if they become obsolete, or add on new dimensions if you need new values without having to make chart changes. You can set default dimensions. So if you have a customer or a general ledger account or a vendor or an item that needs the same dimension assigned to them every single transaction, you can set that default dimension to be added to your transactions automatically. And you can even restrict dimension combinations if you cannot use two different dimensions or different dimension values together. So today we're going to be going through and demonstrating those benefits of these dimensions in person on a specific company that we've built. So let's actually talk about dimensions that we want to track for our demo company today. The Business Central team all really loves coffee. It's one of our favorite things, all of us. So we decided to make a demo company that is of a coffee company called The Whole Bean. And we're going to have dimensions that are allowing us to track information that can give us back valuable data to make decisions about our company. So we have different lines of business. We have coffee that's at home, either instant or whole beans. We have drinks like hot coffee, hot teas, blended drinks, iced teas. We sell breakfast, bakery items, snacks, and merchandise like cups, mugs, water bottles, but we also do services. So we do catering, we deliver, we have extra things like syrups or toppings, and we have our own fees. And we also grind those whole beans that we sell. It's a big part of our business in this demo company, is that we're grinding the beans down for anyone who wants that service. Now I've created these different dimensions already in our company, but we also have two more that we've decided that are really important for us to track. What is our business line, and what location are we completing these different business aspects? So let's go through the process of creating dimensions. I'm going to hop over to Business Central, and you can see here that I have my BC company. Oops, let's make that a little bit bigger here. And I'm currently logged into the whole bean. Now I'm going to go up to my magnification glass, and I'm going to look for dimensions. And I'm going to pull up my dimension setup page. So you can see those different dimension value codes are already created here, but I want to create some different values. So my business line, I would like to look at my business line and create these different values. And after I've created these, we're going to go look at the other guys. But just so you can see how easy this is, I want to create 3 business lines: perishables, goods, and services. Now I can do a code that's either a numerical value, an alpha value, or alphanumerical. It's up to me. Usually you're going to have different reasons for doing them. For this one, I'm just going to do perishable as my code. There is a code limit. I believe it's 25 characters. So as long as we're under that, we could keep that as a code. And I don't want that all capital there. So let's just get these codes in. If you have a lot of codes, you are more than able to import them in so you don't have to hand type them. But for demo purposes, I'm just going to type these in. And get in my just names here. Now the standard value type is going to be defined as what type of code this is, and we'll see that in my next example. After I enter in service location, we're going to go into our different options here, and you can see what that standard code means. I just want to enter in my values on my service location just to show you how simple this is to create these values. And my last one, a third party location. Okay, so now let's look at some of those values for drinks. I'm just going to come over to my drinks here and look at those values. Now we saw on that slide that we have hot coffees, hot teas, hot drinks, blended beverages, but under each section I actually have a more specific kind of segment that I want this to be tracked by. Americanos versus cappuccinos versus lattes, but those all belong in a hot coffee. So see how we have that dimension value type of beginning total and end total. Everything in between is a standard. And then I have this value here totaling everything that's between these two types, begin and end, is rolled into hot coffees. So then when I'm reporting, I can very easily choose to report on hot coffees as a whole or individually here. Now I've done that with a lot of them. So now I could either report on all of these header levels, or if I wanted to get into the nitty-gritties, I could also focus on those. It just makes it a little bit easier. If you didn't do the different sections, that's okay. You can still total. It's just a longer process selecting what you'd like to include. I've done that for drinks. I have food. Now you'll see that on these ones where I have beginning and end total, I actually use numerical values, and that is because the system has an easier time doing these total values on numerical or alphanumerical values. If this was just perishable and then I had different codes under with perishable, it doesn't calculate them the same way. If I did something like A1000, A1001, and then bakery is B2000, you can do the numbering that way. and it will still work because it has the numerical value on the end. It needs that numerical value to total here. So that's going to be your biggest difference of how you're going to use your codes. We have merchandise and all of these values. You can see I did a combination on merchandise of standard and the beginning and end total. So all of our ones at the top are individual sections, and then our other is comprised of several different levels. And then services we have here. So you can see it's very, very easy to set these up. Not a lot needs to go into that after you have decided what types of dimensions you would like to use. Now going back to my presentation here, and then let's, from our current slide here, we might have times where we cannot combine different dimension values together on transactions. So for example, if I have a business line of perishables, I don't want to use a dimension value that's for something like merchandise, services, or at-home coffee, because that's not a food or a drink that I'm making and selling. It's not a perishable item. My business line of goods, conversely, wouldn't have merchandise, would only have merchandise and at-home coffee, not necessarily drinks and food or services. But my business line of services only needs services on there, it doesn't need anything else. So how do we make it so that users aren't mixing and matching dimension values that they shouldn't? There is a dimension combinations inside of Business Central. So if I just, again, come to my looking glass, it's an easy way to navigate through. We see that we have dimension combination. And this is where we get to assign what is allowed and what's not. So here I have my dimension matrix, my codes, and my codes here. So now if I said that I don't want at-home coffee for a specific thing in business line, I can come here, click on it. I'm going to say limited because I'm still going to allow something, but not everything. So now that I've assigned limited, I can click it and I can see the values and limit. So now I don't want my at-home coffee to be part of my perishable. So I'm going to block this. And again, you can do this through imports. So you don't have to do everything by hand, but for purposes of demo, I'm going to go through and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to block that my at-home coffee is not a perishable item. So you would go through any of those that you want. It's also not a service. So I would go through and block all of these. Then when I am going into a transaction, if a user assigned at-home coffee and put it as a perishable, the transaction cannot be posted. So you're never going to get a mix of values that you cannot actually have. So it's an easy process. If you have a lot of different options like I do in this company, you're going to be better off going in and just assigning it. There's something called configuration packages inside of Business Central where you can export an Excel template and you can insert the data that you would like, and then you can just import that Excel template back. So they're already mapped to all of the right fields and it gives you exactly what you have to fill out. You just need to make those decisions and put them in. So it's a very, very easy process. Even though I'm doing these all by hand, you can see it's going pretty quickly. I'm getting through about, I don't know, 20 or 30 of these here in just a matter of a minute or two. So it's not a difficult process, but it saves time and heartache when it comes to those financial statements because we want everything to be allowed in a specific way. You do not have to use dimension combinations. They are all specific to your exact business. Nothing is required for you to have on here. So now that we've created dimensions and we've seen that we can limit them here, we also want to see how we can create those default dimensions. So our default dimensions are going to be assigned to master records. So think GL account, customer or vendor, or an item. And you can also set that you'd like to require a dimension, or you can block a dimension. It's another way of blocking dimensions. And you can even limit what dimensions you would like people to have access to. So let's go on there and do that. Now, the whole bean as a store, I'm only serving cash customers. I'm not putting specific individual customers on here. You could, however, have, in normal environments, if it's not a point of sale, we could have several customers on here. But let's just go in on a customer and see what this looks like. If I'm coming here to related on my customer and then dimensions, I would like to put that maybe this customer is specific to my on-site location, and it's not a customer for my food truck or for my third-party location. I can come here and put same code, service location, on-site, same code. That means that every time I create a transaction with this cash customer, it will automatically put my service location of on-site onto my transaction. And because I use same code, it will not allow me to change it. Now, if I put code mandatory and I had on-site, it'll put on-site on my transaction, but it will let me change it because it's just mandatory. I also have the option of putting code mandatory and leaving dimension value code blank. So if I try to post my transaction and my dimension code is blank, it will let me know, hey, you need to fill in this value before you can move on. I can even come onto my allowed values filter and I can say this is allowed for food truck and on-site, but not a third-party location because they're engaging with me for a catering contract, so they'll be a named customer. But my food truck and my on-site, I can have a cash customer at either one of those locations. So I'm going to allow those two and say, okay. And now I can use either of those values whenever I use this customer on a transaction. The other option that we have here is no code. So that would be an example of if I didn't want my cash customer to have, let's say, a specific value on here, I could say no code. So then, but this is not allowed anyways with my service. But the perishable, I would not be able to have that no code here. I would not be able to use that one there for that value. Okay, so I'm going to just refresh this to remove that here, and I'll delete my line because I don't want to keep that. And that's an example of a customer having a default dimension. Now, we saw on all of our dimension codes, we did things like drinks and food. Now, that's tying directly to an item type. So, for example, I had a drink that was a cappuccino under hot drinks on my drinks dimension. So I'm just going to come here to my item list and I want to look up cappuccino. And hey, look, there's a cappuccino item. And now my cappuccino item is going to tie directly to my cappuccino dimension because I want to see how well my sales are going for my cappuccino type items. Again, under related and item, we have dimensions, and you can see here I have my drinks dimension code saved with my value here. And I have cappuccinos. Now, we can have more than one type of cappuccino or more than one type of brewed hot coffee, and they would all just live under their related bucket. So, for example, if I come back, I'm going to clear out my item list here. We have multiple macchiatos. We have caramel macchiato and espresso macchiato. Well, if I go into my related and dimensions on both of those items, they will both be under the dimension code of macchiatos. So it's a way to group our different item types together to be able to report on our financial level of the different types of items that we're selling and how well that category may be doing. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to do this for items. You could do it for a customer type or maybe a type of an expense or a type of income. It's however or whatever you find the need to report on in your company specifically. So that's all fine and dandy. We can do default dimensions, but what does that actually mean? Why don't we create a sale and take a look at what that looks like? So I'm going to come here to sales and I'm going to do a sales invoice. And I'm going to create a new one. And now I'm going to use my cash customer, and we are going to move down. Brings in my default information. I don't have an address for them because this is just a generic customer that came into my store. And if I wanted to put on an item, I could come here to this item and I'm going to say I would like, I'm going to type in bean, and I want a chocolate covered espresso beans. I'm getting a quantity of 1. Now, if we had different versions of something available or different variants, we could enter that in. This item is just beans, so we don't, but I do want to add a service in. So first I need to put my location, and then I want to come down here, and I'm actually going to do a service. I want to grind those beans for them. So I can put in that service here. There's 1. Now, if you have your unit prices stored for an item, it will automatically populate in. If you do not, then it can be filled in. You can set adjustments for if you would like to not override prices. You can block people from overriding prices, or you can have that allowed. Now, if I scroll all the way over, we're going to start to see those different values. Let me actually add a couple more on just so you can see how cool this is. I would like, let's add on that cappuccino. And I want a small cappuccino. Now, you'll see if I move over here when you're looking at the price, if I'm at small and I go to an extra large, our price is going to adjust depending on what you have set. You have different prices for different variants. And I'm going to scroll all the way over and see those awesome dimensions. Now, remember we had default dimensions set on people. So if we had our cappuccino, here's that default dimension for cappuccinos, where our espresso beans in here are under chocolates and candies. Oh, okay, so these are our candy version, not the ones we're grinding. So, but that's okay, we'll leave our grinding one on there so you can see our services code comes in. Now, if I were to set up all of my appropriate dimension combinations, I could say that I can't have a food code on my small cappuccino. So I can't come here and say it's bagels, or I can't come in here and say that this is a mug, because those aren't appropriate dimensions to have. So you can mix and match, or you can block them. So the mix and match example is going to be that this is actually on site. So all 3 of these are going to be an on-site sale, and maybe we want to put in our line of business, and I don't have that on here, so I'm going to personalize my screen. And I want to look for that field to drag on here. And click in here. So let's just look for that business line and drag that on. Oh, I must not have that set. Oh, it's right in front of me. That was silly. It's just hiding over here. Let me drag that over so it's in a better spot on my unit cost page here. So now if I go to my business line, and again, you can set these as defaults if you want to. I chose not to. This is going to be a perishable. This is going to be a service. And this one's going to be a cappuccino perishable. So now if I had gone through and set up all of my defaults, I wouldn't need to enter in any of this information. So you can see how dynamic this actual process is. If it's something that needs to be chosen at the time, it can be left to a code mandatory or nothing at all so that it can be filled on the transaction. But if it's something that's going to be repeatable and the same every time, then we can leave that there to be chosen. Now on my customer, now this is our line level, right? On our customer, if we wanted to, I can also come here and I can navigate to those dimensions here. So my related and dimensions. Now for my cash customer, I said that I have the option to fill in either the on-site or food truck for my cash customer. So I'm going to come here and I'll give you the example that if we fill in a third party, that I'm going to get an error when I try and post here. So if I preview my posting, I can see my dimension value service location, third party is not allowed for the customer. So it's going to protect you from posting things that are not accurate or not allowed on every single transaction here. So if I update this to on-site and I close it, it's going to make sure I update those lines to reflect the same information, and then I would be able to post. Now, I think I have a low quantity of goods here. If you have turned on that you don't allow your quantities to go negative, it would have stopped that transaction because I don't have it, but I don't have it turned on in this environment. Now I want to look at my posted invoice because I want to see what those dimensions look like. And scroll over, everything came over. Now let's actually check out our GL. So if I go to my customer, I'm just going to go to my customer ledger entries, and that's my historical postings that I've done. So I'm just navigating this way. I could also use my looking glass to check. Now I can see any of my transactions here. I have this as a cash paying customer. So at the same time of posting, it also posted my my cash payment here. You can see it posted the payment and applied it. The only dimension I had on the header level, on my customer level, was on site. So you can see it carried on for just the header level for my customer. Now to see the goods on our financial statement, we can see all those individual dimension values transitioned. We can use what's called account schedules. Now those account schedules, we're going to go over in detail on how to build those tomorrow. But just for a moment, let's take a look at the chart of accounts here and get some details. So now if I were to go into my sales account, I can already see without digging in that I have my dimensions here and they've carried over. So you can see exactly how these have all posted over to our general ledger. Now, one way that we are able to report on these types of dimensions is something called analysis by dimension. And that's just an extra layer that we're adding between our financial reports and being able to see this data. So I'm just going to go to analysis in my looking glass here, and I'm going to type in analysis views. Now I can see that I've got one created. I'll create a new one so you can see what this is. But essentially what we're doing is we're creating a data warehouse of everything that we've posted to our GL, and we are collecting all of our data for our dimensions, and we are creating a way to display it back. Now, these analysis views can be used individually, or they can be used in conjunction with your financial statements that we'll see tomorrow. Today, we're going to look at the matrix that we're going to create to use individually. So I want, let's say I want to report on the food truck sales, or let's do on-site. So I'm going to do on-site, and I want to get a good look at anything that was sold that was on-site. I can filter it on specific GL accounts, or I can just do all. I can do a date compression by day, week, month, whatever we want. I'll just leave it at day. And a starting date you can put in if you want to either have your data just for the last year or for the last 2 years. If you want it for all time, you can leave it blank. And then you're going to choose up to 4 dimension codes that you want the nitty-gritties on in your matrix. So I for sure want my service location because we're specifically doing this on-site. And then I want maybe my business line if I'd like. And I want specifically let's say drinks and food, because I want to know perishable information. We can maybe call this on-site perishables, and get more information specifically on perishable things that I'm selling, so I know what to stock in my store. Very easy to get set up. Now all I have to do is update on posting, and this means that anytime we want to post our transactions, it's automatically going to send that dimension detail over to our data warehouse. So you can see I already have entries that are going to be included. If I wanted to include budgets, I could. For this example, I'm not going to. If you include budgets, we have to update because our budgets don't actually post anywhere other than to a budget, a module in essence. It doesn't post to our GL. So it doesn't update the records on your analysis view. So anytime you're going to run this matrix, there's just an update button that you push and it brings in the rest of your budget information, the most up to date. Now that we've created that analysis view, we can actually utilize that and we can report on it through a matrix, analysis by dimensions. It's another page, and now we're pointing to all of our filters that we would like for this report that we're going to return. If you wanted a date filter, you could fill in a date. So for example, if we did 8/1/21 through 8/31/21, we could have a specific date range. Again, if you leave it blank, it will just be for everything. An account filter. So maybe I only want on this one to view any sales accounts, and maybe COGS we'll put in there. We'll say okay. If you have business units, you can filter. If you wanted specific service locations, any of the 4 dimensions that you assigned, you can filter on. I know I always want on-site, so I'm going to filter that. And I know that I also only want perishable, so I'm going to filter that. But my drinks and my food, I want the details, so I'm going to leave them unfiltered. And at the bottom, you can choose actual amounts, budgets, variance. You can show amount, debits and credits, closing entries, rounding factor. You have all of these different settings that you can have, maybe by day, week, month, or quarter. You can put those in. And once you're ready, you're going to decide how you want to view that. Do you want your lines as a GL account and your columns as a period? If so, that's what you can return. Here's my GL accounts, here's my period by day. Now, if I wanted to have my lines as, let's say we'll leave that the GL account, but then at the top, I want to have my columns by different drinks. I could do that. And I'm going to actually change this by month instead of day. And now I can do my matrix. And now I can see the different values of the drinks. Those are the dimension numbers. And here's per GL account. So you can see it's a matrix of data, and I could click in here. I've got some funky numbers going on. But I could click in and I could see the specific information, and you can even dig down onto these transactions and go to specific account numbers. I could get to the actual transaction if I click into this dollar amount. So it's a great way to see exactly what your data is and how it's being returned back to you. And that is why dimensions are so valuable and so important, because I know, let's say I'm losing money on all of my drinks, this specific number 1003, and I could choose to display my descriptions instead of my dimension numbers. Then I know that maybe I've got a problem with this drink and I need to adjust my cost, my price that I'm selling. And maybe I never, ever, ever in the last 2 years sold this drink, so it needs to come off the menu. So I stopped carrying the goods to make that product. It's a great way to look into your business and get additional data. And how cool is it, on top of it, that you get to define, okay, actually, you know what, instead I want, I'm going to open up my business line, and I'm not going to have it be perishable here. And I want my columns to actually be instead the GL account. And now let's look at it this way. Wow, okay, that's a completely different way of looking at it. Goods, perishables, and services. Which one is most successful? Okay, so a very, very, very powerful tool that we can then use. So not only in this matrix, because once I have actually created this matrix, I can even open that in Excel or export it. Either way, it's going to give you 2 different kind of formats that you can work with. So my export to Excel, This is going to be different than your edit in Excel that you are used to seeing in Business Central because this isn't editable back and forth, but it's going to give you your parameters. And then here it's going to give you the information day, week, month, quarter, year, and your accounting period and your different amounts, debit, credit. So this is one view. But then if you do your open in Excel, it's going to be a different one. So it's just two ways to look at your data. And either one of these reports can be customized if they don't work for you, if you want it to be a little bit different. But they're very handy to have. I like the open in Excel better because you get to filter. It's going to be on whatever parameters you have set. So I had it set to monthly, so I can see monthly here. And I had it set to GL. So this is how it's going to come out. No matter what format you have it set at, it will come out that way. So if I change my columns to drinks and my rows to business line, then it's going to then display in the open in Excel the exact same way. And it comes out filtered and very easily formatted. So it's a great tool to use. Jade and Gina, do we have any questions before I move on?
I have a question for you. My question is, can you give us some examples of different dimensions?
Sure. So some dimensions, if we weren't talking about a coffee company, could be things like salesperson. If you have salespeople and you want to track on each individual line of your transactions who the salesperson was, you can have a dimension that's a salesperson. You can have, we see the state quite often. So if you want to know on a financial level what state you're doing business in, then you are able to put in the state. We have, gosh, so many departments. People use departments like admin, accounting, sales, marketing. We have the business line in here, maybe different services that you're offering that you'd like to track the services that you have. And keep in mind, right now I'm mostly showing you from the sales perspective, but this is just as useful on your expense side. So if you have expenses that you're tracking and you need details on, you can also format your dimensions around that line of business.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome.
There are no questions in the chat. However, I would like to encourage anybody that does have any questions to go ahead and post those in the Q&A in the chat, and we can get those answered for you very quickly. So if you have any questions, please enter those into the Q&A and we will, Michelle can answer those for you.
Perfect. So let's take a look at entering in a journal entry with those dimensions. Now keep in mind it's replacing your segments that you have if you're coming over from GP. It's a great way of categorizing different information. So if I want to create a journal entry here, I can come in and put in my GL account. So let's say we want to put in a purchase here. I'm going to use, and I'm going to do an expense. So let's do utility. I've got one on this. Let's do office supplies. So I need to buy, let's just say I'm buying a whole bunch of cups. And this is cups for the drinks that I'm selling. I'm just going to enter in my description. I'm going to put in my amount here. And then I'm getting over to those dimensions. So I can enter in and let's put in I'm going to put in here that this is for perishable items, and I'm specifically using it on site. I have different cups that I use for my food truck, and this is going to be for, let's say, this is for my refresher drinks. I can put that in my drinks code and track an expense directly to this type of drink. You are also able to allocate amounts to different codes if you need to. You can use several lines. So for example, if I wanted to take off my balancing account here, and if I wanted to allocate maybe this over a few different drinks, I can come down to the next line, and I'm pushing F8. F8 is going to copy directly from above. And I actually want to put in that this is for a different drink. And because I deleted information, it's having me re-enter it here. And I'm actually going to split it out between on-site and food truck. So we'll split those two lines, on-site and food truck. I want to separate them out here. Now, what I could do on my third line is then enter in, we'll say it's going to AP if I wanted to do it that way. And I can offset that amount so that my balance comes out to 0. Now, these two lines are just separating that account, that expense out to different dimension values. If you're doing something like a transaction, a journal entry that is recurring every month, there's also ways to allocate out by percentage that you'd be able to do percentage by dimensions. So it's a very powerful way to track across different lines of business or different departments or different categories of how you'd like to have those costs or those sales tracked here. Okay. So if we don't have any questions, then it's going to be a quiet webinar today.
Yeah, and no questions yet in the chat. So
okay. Well, I'll give you guys about 5 minutes. I'll stay on. Otherwise, our webinar is going to conclude early because we're a little bit quiet. But I thank you guys for joining us, and I also encourage you for joining us tomorrow for the continuation that is on the account schedules, your financial statements, and how we can create individual reports to go with your dimensions. Now, if you head over to truenorthdynamics.com and /webinar, then you will be able to register for that second webinar if you have not already. I think if you had not already registered for the second one, we've reached out to you already, but just in case, if you come over to the website, you're able to register for that second session. In that second session, we will be going in depth on how to create account schedules. That's going to be a very handy session for you to join if you'd like to see how financial statements are handled in Business Central.
Or if you have anybody else at your organization that you think might benefit from that webinar, please encourage them to register for that event.
Okay. Since we have some extra time, I will go ahead while we're waiting for some questions and bring up a new feature that has been recently added to Business Central, and that is to allow the correction of dimensions. So if you accidentally post to your wrong dimension, we are able now to fix those. There is security and permissions that are surrounding the ability to do so. So you don't need to worry that anyone's going to go in and change whatever you've posted, but it is something that's now available. So if we head over to our general ledger entries, we will see any of our entries here, and if we need to make an adjustment, I can click on that specific line, and I can come up and go to entries, and I can correct my dimensions. Now, when we get to this page, it gives you the opportunity to enter in a description. So I'm going to put in here change to food truck sale. I'm going to come down, and in my change section here, I'm going to put food truck. And then towards the bottom, I have another half of my screen where I get to add related entries. So any entries that I've made for this specific transaction, I can bring those on here, and I can say, you know what, actually, I need to change this to food truck for everything. So it's going to give me the ability to have that value selected for all of my entries and make sure that those changes are happening everywhere it should. It also will have this update analysis views, which we just looked at, to make sure that that data on your matrix is updated. Now, the first step is to validate your dimension changes and running that immediately. So you can set it on a timer so it happens in the middle of the night if you want to. If you're making changes on thousands and thousands of lines, I would say to set it to run when no one's really working. But when you're doing a few just like this, it's not going to impact performance whatsoever. So I'll run immediately. And now when I come back, it's just validating that everything is going to post correctly. I can see here on the history of my dimensions, I have a draft and it's been validated. Here's our notes. And now I can actually run that. I can again say run immediately. And it was successfully scheduled. If I refresh my page now, and I look at my line items, they now have been changed to food truck.
Oh, fantastic. So, Michelle, Jody wanted to find out from you what the best way to start trying to figure out how to convert from the current chart of accounts to a dimension report. And I assume, Jody, that means coming from GP and going over to BC. Is that a correct statement? And Michelle, maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, so I'm going to say it could probably be with GP. That's a great example, but really with any financial company that you're coming from or ERP product that you're coming from, we're going to reevaluate your chart. It's the perfect time to do so. Business Central uses the natural account only. So usually if we're coming from GP or another ERP product that uses account segments, then that's the first place you're going to want to start. You're going to want to see if you have account segments that you're currently using, or maybe you were using and don't use it anymore. See what those values are and what you're tracking. Those are usually going to be the first thing to become dimensions. And then after that, you're going to want to look at your actual financial statements that you have now. What are things that you wish that you could track? What are things that you wish that you could tell people about or have the knowledge on? And Gina reminded me yesterday, another great thing to look at for GP customers is that your reporting trees that are in Management Reporter. What are you using your reporting trees for? Because that's probably a great place to look at the possibility of dimensions. So it's all about segments and what you wish you had data on, because this is going to give you the nitty-gritty details. And we'll see that again tomorrow in our financial statements, how you can take these dimensions and use them for reporting.
Great. Fantastic. Thanks for the question, Jody.
Yes, thank you. All right, well, with that, if we don't have any other questions, I'll give you guys back 10 minutes of your day. And I appreciate everyone for joining us and learning a little bit more about dimensions. As always, if you have questions, please reach out to your account manager. If you don't know who your account manager is, you are able to email accountmanagers@truenorthdynamics.com. We love questions. We love it when you guys engage with us. So please send them on over. They are waiting to hear from you, and we would love to answer anything that you'd like to know about Business Central. Have a wonderful day, everyone.